Hello. Typically when I talk about stuff on this channel, a lot of the stuff kind of either already happens or I've already processed a lot of the emotions and stuff like that. Today's is not that. Today is I'm going to be talking about an incident that like just happened a couple of hours ago. And I actually wanted to make sure that I got a lot of my initial thoughts on it to just get my, initial feelings on it through and process them myself. Today's video is going to be talking about my stepdad and my mother. Both of them have a lot of issues with themselves, but I think I should introduce them properly first. My mother has a lot of issues with just a whole bunch of stuff, spiritually, mentally, and physically. She's always had a bunch of issues with herself. My stepdad has also had a bunch of issues with himself. Recently physically, but also mentally. He's been having a lot of issues. He's been kind of doing a lot of stuff. Today's video is not going to be a list of all the bad things that they've done. In reality, both of them have a lot of pretty glaring flaws, and I've always been kind of aware of a lot of the flaws that they have. But luckily today, I think some healing just took place that I never thought in a million years could ever happen. And honestly, I'm pretty proud of what I've done today. I think I did really well. So yeah, let's begin. So a bit of background. My mother is not the most savvy person in the world, to put it bluntly, and a little bit light, to be honest. She is someone with a very troubled past and a very troubled present, and a lot of the issues that she goes through is kind of taken over her mind and has caused her to lash out over recent years. She is somebody who very much wears her emotions on her sleeve, but also doesn't really know how to control her emotions or even process them quite yet, and hasn't been like that. It's been like that pretty much for my entire life. She's never been very good with that. As a result, she kind of had to provide a supplement for me and my siblings because she never had the ability to provide for us emotionally. To give more context, she's pretty emotionally manipulative and just a bunch of other not so cool things. She's definitely not the greatest person when it comes to communication and stuff like that. She's also pretty hard-headed. It's been very difficult for me as her child, having to kind of navigate a lot of her pent-up emotions. I think there's a difference between processing emotions and controlling them, and then letting them run rampant. Both her and my stepdad have kind of the same issue in that regard, where they have never been taught quite how to process their emotions, and as a result, they kind of let them explode, or they let them build up over time. So as a result, me and my siblings have always kept her at arm's length when it came to like a lot of emotional maturity and stuff like that. She's been through a lot, obviously, to get to that point, so we, as her children, kind of have a lot of sympathy for her in that regard. But also at the same time, we kind of had to look out for ourselves a lot of the time because, we didn't have that person who could teach us all of this stuff that I'm currently about to talk about. My stepdad is very similar. I think his emotions and my mom's emotions are kind of come from a very similar vein of being afraid to talk about it or just not knowing how to talk about it. This is kind of partly on just not having that clean support system to encourage that kind of behavior. Unfortunately, a lot of older generations, if not most older generations, are taught that emotions that are negative, like anger, angst, stuff like that, is not good emotions to have. And that kind of really, really hurts them because they, instead of processing those emotions and letting them go through, they let them control them. They let them control their actions. So before we talk about what happened today, I'm going to actually talk about something that happened about 2 days ago from the time of recording this, and the time of this incident as well. My mother and stepdad had a pretty disgusting argument. Basically, I'm not going to get into specifics of what it was, because to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of a very typical argument between them. Probably something inconsequential at the end of the day, but something that probably provoked both of them to argue. As a result, my stepdad kind of let his emotions control him unintentionally and kind of exploded at my mom. My mom took it on the shoulder and unintentionally continued to provoke him. And honestly, I kind of had a little bit of not a breakdown or anything like that, but I definitely let my emotions overtake me as well during that day. I talked to my mother, but it wasn't in a sound mind. I think I was just annoyed and pissed that they were continuing to fight when I had a lot of stuff to do that day. And I just wasn't really in the mood to deal with all that stuff. So I said a lot of things to my mother, but they weren't... I'm not going to say they're in the right mind, or they were the correct things to say. But what I will say is there was some stuff that I think kind of unintentionally opened some doors for today. At the end of the day, I kind of told my mom that I wanted to help her, and she was very upset and wasn't taking the advances I was giving her. And I think the only thing I took away from that conversation was that I tried. It was the last thing. I tried to help her, and I ended up telling her, "Mom, I can't help you." And that kind of messed me up for the next 2 days. You know, it's very difficult to tell someone you love you can't help them unless they help themselves. And maybe it just wasn't the right time to tell her that, you know, maybe it just wasn't the right time. I mistimed it. So I kind of was thinking about that for a little while, and I felt really bad about what I told her as well, but she had to hear it. Fast forward to to today, I think my mom wanted to kind of process those emotions, but she obviously doesn't know how to properly do it, but she still tried anyways. She tried to reconcile with my stepdad. Unfortunately, she didn't go about doing it in the correct way. She took away his keys, which kind of unintentionally provoked him into just snapping at her once again. I ran up the stairs as well to kind of check what's happening again, because they were arguing. I got told that she took both of his keys, both pairs of keys, and the reason for it was to try to talk out stuff with him. Unfortunately, what my mom didn't realize was, A, she was provoking him, but more importantly, B, his journey for mental health is something that both him and her kind of had to process by themselves. There was probably years of pent-up frustration and anger building up between these two. And it kind of just came to an explosion that day. And yeah, it was rough. It was definitely rough seeing that. So I kind of saw him, my stepdad, kind of just explode, which was very rare. He kind of had to walk off. I told him to walk away and let me talk to her. Now, luckily for me, this time, unlike last time where I was frustrated, I think this time I was a little bit more on the I just wanted to hear what was happening side. So I asked my mother what was happening, and she told me, hey, I wanted to talk about what's wrong with my stepdad. She said, I want to know what's wrong with him. But in her own, like, not understanding kind of way, like she's kind of clueless, that she, in a way, even though she's trying to help, is, you know, she was provoking him. And it kind of sucked. I don't know if it was the amount of, I think it was both the amount of time and frustration over 23 years of not getting any progress with my mother done, and getting so much progress with myself done with my own mental health journey throughout this year. I've made literally, like, I've basically climbed Mount Everest at this point with how much progress I've made. And I think seeing the frustration between two people that I love arguing and not reconciling kind of pushed me to the edge. And so I told my mother everything that she needed to know from my perspective. I poured my heart out to her. I told her absolutely everything that she needed to hear. And I told her stuff that I don't even think I processed well myself. There's plenty of stuff that I'm just actually discovering myself today. Like, there's tons of examples that I'll probably go over in a future video. But I basically poured my heart out and soul and told her a lot of the issues that was kind of going on with her and my stepdad as well. But I told her at the end of the day, a lot of these issues I cannot fix. I can only tell you they exist, kind of thing. Like, a lot of the, you know, a lot of times people tend to want to know what's wrong with them or what's wrong with certain people. But I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of those issues just come down to inexperience, you know? A lot of the times, it's not that anger or sadness or fear are bad emotions. The thing that makes them bad is when they're uncontrolled and not processed fully. So that's what I told her. I basically told my mom something that I've always wanted to tell her in a way, but I didn't know how to explain it. And for some reason today, I just knew how to do it. I knew how to tell her. And I think I, in a way, finally got to her. You know, I've always had this frustration. I've always felt like she was just out of reach and that what she really needed was licensed professional help. But also she needed to need that help, want to get that help. Unfortunately, when someone's mentally ill, you really cannot help them. They want to be able to help themselves, because once they are able to help themselves, things become a lot easier and a lot more, I wouldn't say simple, but it's a way tougher battle trying to fix somebody who doesn't want to be fixed or doesn't see anything wrong. And that was kind of what was going on with both my mother and stepdad, but I think more from my mother, since a lot of the things that she's going through are things that I've kind of also went through. My mother is incredibly lonely and has been for a very long time. She's had depression. She's had medical issues. All of those things are things that I also have went through. All of those things are things that I kind of have a similar experience with. I told her a lot of that stuff, and I also told her that she just needed therapy. She needed to see a therapist. She needed to see that a lot of these issues that she's going through had to stop, you know? Or at the very least, she needed to see professional help. Unfortunately, I kind of inadvertently gave up on her. Honestly, as recently as like this week, after the fight, the first incident where I kind of yelled at her, I was pretty much pleading and begging for her to get help, and it just wasn't the right time. And I think that was one of the most heartbreaking things I think I've ever had to do, and just give it up. So, kind of having a second wind, a second chance to give her, and to tell her a lot more in a calm and orderly fashion instead of in an impulse fashion, what I truly felt about a lot of the things she was going through, and a lot of the things that I went through, was really refreshing. So eventually, she kind of understood a lot of the stuff that I talked about, and I think she finally is open to getting help. Now there's kind of one more issue that kind of started to rear its ugly head, and it was that she still had my stepdad's keys. So this is where stuff starts to get a bit stressful, because unfortunately, she wanted to talk to my stepdad about a lot of this stuff. And my stepdad at this point was in a pretty vulnerable spot. He didn't get the keys to the car, and he didn't have his way to just escape and kind of go out on his own. So I told him to take a walk. And after talking with her, I think she wanted to talk to him about stuff. But the thing is, a lot of the stuff that I told her is so insanely, like, complex and she just needed to process it and focus on that alone. I think she's kind of jumping. She wanted to jump the gun, and I think part of it was kind of her controlling nature, and part of it is she's scared that something might have happened to him. I did end up calling my stepdad, and here's where stuff gets scary. He sounded like he just wanted to get ran over. He wanted somebody to just take his life, and he told me that kind of in Spanish, and I don't know if this was a mistake, but I ended up telling my mom that that's what he told me. And instead of listening to me, she kind of went in a car and started looking for him. I think in that moment, her panic started to set in that she might lose my stepdad. I told her to let me go find him because I'm a lot better at kind of talking to him than she ever was. You know, he always kind of exploded at her whenever she tried to talk to him, because, you know, she provokes people in a way where, honestly, she can drive sometimes people to just want to kill her, just want to hurt her. And I know I'm not the only one, because I think, honestly, all three of our kids have probably had very similar experiences to what I'm talking about. She just kind of takes you there, you know? My mother has always been that way. She ran off on her own, and I think now is where my panic started to set in, because she's just not equipped to help my stepdad. And she just couldn't accept it. She was scared that something was going to happen to him, which is understandable. But it was just not the right time to talk to him. I knew that he was in a very volatile state from the way he talked on the phone. And the fact that she went out to talk to him, I didn't know if she was putting her own life in danger or unintentionally putting his life in danger. So I ended up calling my sister, and just texting a bunch of my friends and stuff like that to just like, oh, you know, pray for me, etc., etc. Because I think I was kind of in this panic state. I ended up telling my sister and keeping her posted, and eventually I just told her to, you know, get her ass moving and start driving a car towards me so we can find him. Luckily for us, we ended up finding him. He walked pretty far. He kind of walked in the highway and got pretty far away from the house. I did talk to my mother for a pretty long time, and I feel like I genuinely, like, I think that's one of my proudest accomplishments. I think the talk that I had with her, for the first time, I felt like I actually got to her, you know? I felt like I wasn't talking out of my ass, and I think part of it was the amount of self-help content that I was consuming. Although it helped me, I think more than anything, it's gonna help the people that I love to understand themselves. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I actually helped bring my mother to progress, which is something I never thought would be possible before. So I'm really proud. So we ended up finding my stepdad, and he seemed like in a pretty vulnerable state, obviously. You know, he was upset, and he honestly seemed like he wanted to cry. So I kind of decided at that point that my sister was probably the best person to talk to him about this stuff. So he ended up, I think, now he's at her house and kind of processing a lot of these things. And they kind of just needed to be apart, my stepdad and my mother, for this kind of whole thing, because a lot of these emotions you have to kind of go on a own self-discovering journey to really truly process them, because at the end of the day, the only reliable person in a lot of these emotional instances is yourself. That is something I know very, very well. For 23 years, you know, in the loneliness video, I talked about how I kind of had to do everything on my own, and I was never anyone's kind of number one priority. And it's not anyone's fault that it's like that. It's kind of just the way things are sometimes. There's obviously exceptions, and I think the exceptions really only have merit if the person, like, if you marry someone, for example, I think that you should only marry someone if you already processed your own emotions and are the best person you can be. If you marry someone when you're not at your best person you can be, or at least you feel that way, like you're not the best person you can be, Or if you don't compromise and accept that you guys are going to work on each other for the rest of your lives, it can be very difficult. Like, sometimes people marry, and the reason why there's a lot of a divorce nowadays, you know, the high divorce rate, is because some people just get into it way too fast. They don't truly know the extent of a lot of the things that go through. Some people just want relationships for convenience sake. Some people want a partnership. Some people want a companion. Some people want favors. Like, relationships are so complicated, and love, relationships wise, whether it be through family or, you know, couple stuff, is one of the most difficult things to understand. Truly, I honestly, even myself, I struggle with this kind of stuff. So all that to say that a lot of the things that my mother and stepdad were going through had to be done by themselves. Eventually, we got home with my stepdad in the car, and we made sure he was safe and everything. And my mother wanted to talk to him, and my sister kind of had to come in and say, hey, he doesn't want to talk to you right now. He has to process this on his own. And I think part of the reason she was so panicked is, you know, she heard someone was, he pretty much sounded suicidal at that point. He was acting reckless. And also part of it was kind of her controlling nature, her controlling aspect. She didn't want him to go, in a way, and she doesn't want him to go. And so we asked her for the keys, and she wouldn't give them up for some reason. She doesn't realize the extent of her kind of manipulation tactics. In her way, that was kind of her mind, either mind or enemy, or what, you know, whatever you want to call it, keeping her from feeling uncomfortable, from facing reality. And so my sister kind of gave her a speech, and kind of for the first time in a while, I saw my mother just bawl, just cry. I think it's the first truly hearty cry she had. My sister basically told her a lot of what I was telling her. And, you know, hearing it from me, maybe it wasn't processing, and maybe hearing it from my sister finally gave her the kind of go-ahead. And, you know, she started crying, and we hugged her, and she said to both of us, you know, it's so lonely. I'm so lonely. And we just had to tell her, you know, that we're there for her. You know, I kind of gave up on my mother for the longest time. I kind of figured that a lot of the things that I would have to teach her have to come from professional help. I think that she relies on a lot of spiritual stuff, which, unfortunately for her, is one of three things that are important in life. Mental and physical are things that she was never kind of good at reconciling. And because she neglected both of those things, her spiritual side, if she cares about that, you know, religion and stuff, hasn't been able to flourish. And also, you know, she kind of lashes out on other people with those emotions as well. I think bottom line, both of my mom and stepdad just need to know that they need therapy. Pretty much is the entire gist of this today, what happened today. And like I said, in a way I feel bad because I felt like I actually gave up on my mother like a couple of days ago, like 2 days ago. I just like didn't know what to do. So I think at that point I was just like, maybe it's the best that she has to be alone truly to finally recognize it. But I'm honestly glad that it didn't come to that, and I finally was able to talk to her legitimately, and that she finally broke down, and I got to finally see, you know, my real mother. Not the one that was burdened by all this stuff that she's going through. Not the one who manipulated me, but the mother that me and my siblings have always wanted. Someone who is vulnerable and willing to give herself a chance to finally be someone that we all want to be. honestly, what I've learned is that my research didn't go to waste. A lot of the self-help research I did in March was for my own benefit. And it's kind of a constant thing for me. Therapy is something that I think I'm probably going to not struggle with too much, but also I need to have specific things to work on from a therapist as well, which is why I'm going to therapy. I've always been someone who, I wouldn't say I necessarily needed therapy in a way, because my therapy has always been talking to people. I've never been shy about it. But I also feel like everybody needs therapy because they need to try therapy. Once you find a good therapist, knowing how your mind works, and if they teach you how your mind works and you know how it works, suddenly you're not controlled by your mind and the chemicals in your brain and stuff anymore. And it's been liberating. I felt like I had a lot of depression this past couple of months, and I certainly wanted a psychiatrist to see, but in a strange way, a lot of the work that I put in and that I'm continuing to put in is actually coming out, and it's working out. It is difficult to do all this stuff by myself, but I wasn't just doing it for me. In a way, I was doing it for my mother and stepfather as well. Knowing that they had issues was one thing, but I think now they're finally starting to understand the true extent and the true damage they've caused others and themselves. And it's liberating. It feels good. It feels like I finally made progress for once, on other people and not just me. I'm relieved. Finally, today, I think it's one of my proudest days. I felt like I finally reached the two people that I love, and that I didn't just give up on them. And honestly, I was fully ready to, It's hard to help somebody who doesn't want to help themselves. People who have had similar experiences know exactly what I'm talking about. If somebody doesn't want to help themselves, it's not that they're a lost cause, it's just very, very difficult. You're not going to be able to help them. They need to want it. When somebody is mentally unwell, when somebody has an addiction, when somebody has all these insane problems, the best thing that you can do is provide from them the option to get help. Provide for them the option of getting better. Provide from them the unfiltered and real consequence of the things that they've done. Be real about it, Honestly, my biggest advice is, if there's somebody in your life that you feel are a lost cause, you feel like they cannot be helped, see if you can get them professional help. Right now, we're only just getting started with the healing process for my mother and my stepdad. And I've mostly talked about my mother today. But I'm just so happy that finally something happened with them. I've always felt really guilty that I ultimately made the decision that I might have to abandon them, that they might be lost causes, that the age difference, the culture difference was going to forever prevent them from ever getting proper help. I'm glad it's not the case. I feel like today, more than any day in the world, any day that I've had in my life, I feel like today was one of the rare instances where I feel like I was put on this earth to accomplish something. I feel like the speech that I gave my mother and the processing that I gave her, the comfort that I gave her when she cried, the things that my sister did, and the knowledge that I imparted upon her as well. I'm the youngest of three, and I think my big advantage is the way that I've processed stuff over my life has tons of wisdom of others backed behind it. I've had the advantage of being the younger sibling, which means I kind of get a lot more leeway to do things the better way, you know? And I think today is probably the best example of that. In reality, I don't think there was anything really pushing me to help my mother out in that instance. I could have just walked away. And I got advice from other people saying, you know, this isn't your business. Walk away from it. Even my own family members were saying that. Even my sister, who ended up helping me with this, the things that happened today, told me the same thing, to just leave them. And I kind of think I was ready to, but for some reason today, after seeing how childish my mother was kind of acting with the car keys stuff, I kind of just decided maybe she just needs to hear my perspective. And I told her and exposed to her a lot of stuff that I was currently processing, and also things that nobody ever knew about me. And I think as a result, it kind of opened her eyes. My goal was never to make her feel bad, you know. I love my mother and I always will. I think a lot of people justifiably dismiss a lot of their abusive parents. They usually come with a lot of baggage, and it's kind of just a generational thing sometimes. A lot of these people are awful, truly awful sometimes, but you also have to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt and see them from their perspective. And even if they are horrible and they continue to be horrible, even allowing them the chance to realize it for themselves, and if they choose to be that way, you know, you learn from the process. But if you make them realize, I think sometimes people put too much blame on themselves. A lot of the issues that come from life really come from your mind, and not just mind playing tricks on you, but just not understanding how emotions in the mind work. We are in a generation, we are going to only get more knowledge imparted upon us and studied it on how the mind works. Psychology is such an interesting field. Doing research for, you know, psychology has been so interesting, and self-help stuff, self-coaching and whatever. It's been so helpful for me, and it's honestly eye-opening that this isn't like taught in schools. Genuinely, like, I don't know why this stuff is being not taught. It's such a detriment. People, and side tangent, but I feel like the people who know the most about how the mind works are the wrong people, because they're advertisers. Advertisers usually know, but I'm not gonna get into that. It's kind of a ramble. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. Obviously, if my mother and stepdad ever watch this, just know that I love you both. It's probably going to be a very harrowing and long journey for the both of them, and I kind of wish them the best of luck. The fact that they're even starting this journey is kind of more than I ever would have expected from both of them. But my biggest advice is to keep moving forward. Don't stop. It's gonna be hard, and it might seem like it's an impossible feat to conquer the mind. It might feel like you're constantly going an uphill battle, and what's the point? But just remember that usually the mind only plays tricks on you because it feels uncomfortable, you know? The only reason that your mind is even not wanting to change is because change is bad. It's uncomfortable. It feels icky. Sometimes you gotta force your mind to do it, though. That's something I know very well. I struggled with so many things. I was kind of addicted to games for a little bit. I used it as a coping mechanism. I was addicted to a whole bunch of other stuff that we'll get into in later videos. I have a lot of my own issues as well. I'm not a perfect being. As much as I pretend that I am, you know, I'm not a perfect being at all. You know, to close the video out, again, to my parents, my mom and stepdad, The biggest advice I can give you is to keep moving forward. Don't stop. If times get tough, if it seems difficult, if it seems hard, you know, you have people, and if you ever feel alone, you can talk to them. But I think more important than that, just know that there are millions of other people out there that are going through the same thing that you are. And there are also millions of people out there that also just never got that chance. They don't have those people to tell them that something is wrong with them. And so they spent their entire lives mismanaged, unhinged, letting their emotions take control of them, not processing their emotions, letting it build up. And then they end up feeling the worst emotions: loneliness, sadness, depression. Sometimes they have suicidal thoughts, sometimes they go reckless, sometimes they act out, you know? And a lot of times, it ends badly. But it's not their fault. I don't think anybody can be blamed for not knowing how their own mind works. Sometimes those impulses can take control of you. And I think the biggest thing you can do, the biggest favor you can do for other people and yourself, is learning to control. And learning to realize how it works. So long as you are aware that a lot of your emotions are either just that, emotions, they're not truly you, they're just insecurities and stuff that's very similar to that. As long as you can kind of recognize that that's, you know, that's what it is, then you'll be fine. If I had to give one piece of advice to everybody in the world, just one, it would be to, if you're going to work on something, whether it be therapy, emotions, or even just a passion, keep going. Don't stop. A lot of times people try this stuff, therapy, working emotions, crying, all of these things, working on something, projects. They try it, and then they give up immediately. Trying, I can almost guarantee you, is the easiest part. But keeping a maintaining that discipline is harder than anything that you will ever do, but you have to do it. There are people out there who process and go through a lot of things, and even after years, just give up. And they end up hurting themselves because they don't realize that, you know, it's not that the breakthrough is there, it's just that they still need the time to process it. Life is short, but also, things also take time. That's kind of the bad thing about life. Even though it's short, some of these things that you kind of go through in life take so much time and effort to go through and process. Life isn't fair, boys and girls. It's just not. And it's okay. So yeah. My one piece of advice is keep a schedule, keep doing stuff consistently, but also just keep moving forward. Sometimes all it takes is 5 minutes a day to do one thing, and then over 30 days, that 5 minutes turns to whatever 5 times 30 is, and then over a year it turns to whatever 5 times 365 is. I'm not doing the math. Editor me, please do the math. I actually don't think I'm doing the math. Editor me, never mind, don't do it. But yeah, I hope this didn't sound like a incoherent ramble. This is pretty much taking place after all of this stuff that just happened, and I don't know if I explained it well, so sorry if I didn't. But I think it's important to get my initial thoughts and process all the emotions that I just felt off the bat, you know, off rip. Just get them out and get an archive of it, because I think it's important. And yeah, I'm really happy today. I made a lot of progress. I finally feel like, you know, I was put on this earth to do one thing, and that was to be here today. And, you know, my work isn't done. I'm certainly not giving up on anything anytime soon. I still have a lot of work to do. But man, after feeling like 23 years I was mindlessly going about doing stuff, and after this entire month of processing, feeling like maybe all of this stuff is worthless, getting the payoff of finally helping my loved ones out is a greater accomplishment than anything I think I will ever do in my life. I finally was able to help my mother. That's something I can never pay anybody. That is something that's priceless. Something I can never pay anybody to do. Hopefully, you know, hopefully my mother doesn't just give up after a little bit. It's gonna be hard. Same thing with my stepdad. I hope that they continue on and just understand that this stuff takes time and it's not gonna be easy, but as long as they keep at it, they will see improvement. Hopefully next rant isn't as heavy. I do want to talk about heavy topics, but I think the last 3 videos have kind of been very, very recent incidents that have happened in my life, and I think I want to do more topical videos, as in, like, talking about specific emotions that I feel, specific things that I'm very passionate about. I don't just want to talk about depresso espresso stuff, I also want to talk about maybe being happy. Happiness. Maybe that'll be next video, happiness. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. If you have a loved one that you feel like can't be reached, you feel like cannot be reached at all, my advice is to just... maybe sometimes it takes a big event. Sometimes it takes them having a pivotal moment in their lives to realize it. I don't know how to give a blanket statement on how to fix everybody in this world. But what I do know is that almost everybody on the planet can be helped in some way. And so if you feel like you're struggling with it, talk to that person and see if you can help them. And sometimes help doesn't just have to be for them, it can also be for you. If you feel like you can help them, or if you feel like it's even impossible, just attempt it and see what happens. You never know how it can go. I never thought that the 2 people in my house were within my field of view, and after today I very well think that they can process themselves and give themselves make themselves better people by the end of their lives. But yeah, that's all I wanted to speak about. Hopefully next video is a little more happy.